everyone and welcome back to my channel Beth Chats Books. Now today's video is going to be my November wrap up part 1 because I have quite a lot of books I've already read. We are on the 14th of November and I read quite a few books, so I'm going to get through this back catalogue of books that I've read in November and then I'll do a part 2 by the end of November with any books that I finish in the second half of November. So I'm just going to get straight stuck in with this because I have 8 books to show you guys today. So the first one I finished was The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse, and this was incredible and I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Now this is a new release coming out in 2021, I believe. I think a lot of people have proof copies of it now. I think it's February or January that it's coming out. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I was approved on NetGalley for a reviewer copy, and this is published by Penguin Random House, and it was really nice with this book experience because when I finished it I was a little bit gushy about how much I enjoyed it, and I managed to find the author Sarah Pearse on Instagram and I just sent her a message saying thank you for writing this book. I absolutely loved it and I'm so excited to see what happens next and what you write next, and she sent me a lovely message back, so that was really nice to kind of have some communication with the author. I think we write reviews all the time as book vloggers and bloggers, and sometimes we forget that a human being wrote the book, put a lot of effort into it, especially when it's their debut, and to be able to have that intimate connection with the author and to thank them personally was really rewarding for me. But anyway, I'll get on to the actual book. So it's set in the Swiss Alps and it's a hotel that used to be a sanatorium for people with consumption. The belief was that the fresh air of the Alps would help cure their illness. And we follow Eileen, I don't know how you say her name, and she is invited to this hotel because her brother Isaac is engaged to Laurie, and Eileen and her partner Will are invited to the hotel to celebrate their engagement party, and Laurie works in the hotel. But then when they get there, after a few days, Laurie goes missing out the blue and they try and work out the mystery of where she's gone. It's also really atmospheric because the setting is in winter, it is cold, the Swiss Alps is a really atmospheric winter read, and then it also has the weather playing a really interesting role in the mystery because there is avalanches and weather storms and they're completely cut off from the rest of the world. And it was just so interesting. It also talks a bit in the book about the past history of what the building was like when it was a sanatorium, and we start to unravel mysteries that happened in the past. I love the idea of a creepy institute building and how it was turned into a swanky hotel, but how the sanatorium itself has a personality in this novel as well. It takes on a creepy role, and how Eileen is a very unsure character. She's unsure of herself, she's unsure of her relationships, she's an anxious person. She is a police officer that's on leave due to a trauma that happened at home in the UK, and we get more information about that. We question whether she's a reliable narrator. It's just absolutely fantastic, and I think it is the best thriller that I've read this year so far, and I think it has automatically springboarded itself onto my favourite reads of 2020. I just found it hit all those themes that I wanted a thriller to hit. It ticked all those boxes in terms of creepy, the winter vibe, the creepy building, the weather kind of being pathetic fallacy for what's going on inside the building. The characters were really interesting, and Eileen is a really fascinating person to spend time with. She has distorted memories, she has childhood memories that we need to go into in the book to find out more about her relationship to her brother and to her partner, and to Laurie herself. She has quite an interesting relationship with Laurie, so it's so good. The ending was left really open and left you on tenterhooks, and also slightly suggested that this might be a series. And I've seen people do reviews of this book since I finished it and post them on Instagram and NetGalley and other places with a suggestion that it might be part of a series. So it wasn't just me that had that inkling. But absolutely fantastic, and I would really recommend that when this comes out you get your mitts on it, because especially in winter time when it's going to be released, it will just absolutely satisfy that winter thriller mystery craving for sure. So there's the Sanatorium. And then I finished The Shadow King by Marza Mingesti, and I was actually a little bit disappointed with this book. I found the history of this book way more fascinating than the actual novel. So this is set in the 1930s in Ethiopia and follows the Italian invasion of Ethiopia and Mussolini's army coming to Ethiopia, and it's from the point of view of Herut, who is a maid for Aster and Kidani, and she has been taken in by Kidani because she lost her parents, and he had a intimate relationship with her mother, not romantic, but they had almost a sibling relationship, and he had an affection for her mother, and he promised her mother before she died that he would take care of her daughter. So she ends up living with them, and she is essentially the staff, and she has a gun that her dad gave her before he died to protect herself for when Mussolini's army comes to Ethiopia. And then they start building a kind of army against Mussolini, and very subtly she becomes involved in it, and she ends up helping them through training. And then there is a section in the book when she gets captured by Mussolini's army, and there is an Italian who's a photographer who is in charge of keeping her caged in, and they have a bit of a relationship that is platonic, but that is, I don't know how to describe it. They kind of have a bit of an affection for each other, and they care about each other even though they are on opposite sides of the coin in terms of this unrest and this war that's going on in Ethiopia. So there was fragments of the novel that I really invested in, and then other bits that just completely lost me. And I'm really happy that this book is out there, because it's a narrative that focuses on women and Ethiopian women's role in the war and how they were soldiers and they did fight. And I think that's a really important narrative to write about and to make sure it's in the public sphere and that we don't miss that narrative, because it's very important. But in terms of reading, I didn't find this a pleasurable experience. It had a bit of a dragging quality for me, and maybe it was just the wrong time to read this. Maybe I didn't know enough about the topic and it lost me. But after reading Shuggie Bain, that was on the shortlist for the Man Booker this year, and absolutely loving it and connecting with it and just finding it absolutely phenomenal, I haven't managed to find another book in the list yet that's hit that same peak for me. I've ended up giving Shadow King 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was written incredibly well. The characters intrigued me all the way through. I really liked hearing this history of the Ethiopian War because I knew nothing about it, but the plot felt a little bit soggy for me and not tangible and not something that I could really invest in. So I lost interest as a reader, but I think that might just be me personally. I know a lot of people have enjoyed The Shadow King. I just think it lost me, unfortunately. And then I read The Guest List by Lisa Foley. So this is the second book that Lisa Foley has out. She previously had The Hunting Party. So this is set in a remote Scottish island. It is really completely on its own. It's remote, it's nowhere near any other civilization, and you have to get to it by boat. And as Mara from books like Woe has mentioned, it is your quintessential closed circle mystery, because a death occurs on the evening of the wedding, which is Will and Julia's wedding, and we have to figure out who died and who killed them. Now, Will is a character that a lot of the other characters that are brought together for the wedding do not like. So he has made a career out of himself, a bit like a Bear Grylls character, from being the ultimate survival Ken doll style man who manages to survive blizzards and survive poisonous snake bites and things like that. And he has a reality TV show in which he goes off and does these experiments in the middle of nowhere and lives out his wild life, and it becomes consumer television. And Julia is very beautiful, she's successful, she has her own website, which is an online magazine, and they look like the perfect couple. But there's a lot that's going on underneath the surface. Julia's sister, half-sister, Olivia, is a very troubled child. She's the main bridesmaid for the wedding, and she has a history with Will that we start to learn a little bit about. And then we learn about Will's relationship to his childhood friends, particularly Johnny, I believe, or Jono. I forgot what he's called now. He just had a stupid name, something like Jono. And they've been friends since their school days. They were privately educated. Will's father was the headmaster of the private school, and Johnny, or Jono, or whatever he's called, ended up getting a scholarship. But the rest of the kids were from wealthy backgrounds, so they all went to this private school together, and they all have this very Etonian Lord of the Flies relationship to each other. They had this game at school called Survival, where they did crazy tricks like grabbing other boys out of their beds in the middle of the night, leaving them in the middle of the woods tied up. It was all very strange. But all these elements come together for piecing this story of who is murdered and who murdered them. And who was murdered was very obvious to me, but unfortunately who murdered the person who was murdered I didn't care about, because these characters, I think it's the point. I think Lucy Foley creates characters in which you feel indifferent to them because they might be of a higher class to you as a reader, and they might be quite snooty about it, or they might be quite racist, or they might be quite opinionated, and they are characters that you do not gel with, you do not feel any empathy for, and ultimately you do not care about. I think she does a fine line, because you still have to keep reading, you still have to know definitely what happened. And I did have some characters I really enjoyed. I enjoyed Julia's male best friend's wife, I've forgotten her name now, and Olivia were the two characters, and their little friendship that kind of develops throughout the wedding, the day of the wedding and the evening before the wedding, was quite enjoyable for me. But this didn't get me quite as much as Hunting Party. I thought Hunting Party was very clever, and I didn't see that one coming. And I think because she'd brought some tricks out in the Hunting Party, I think they were repeated here, but they were expected here. So I really like the setting, and I do like this whole closed, isolated element of a mystery. In Sanatorium, I loved that it was set in winter, and here it was set in summer. But it didn't blow me away in any particular way. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was enjoyable when I was reading it. So it just gets a run-of-the-mill 3 out of 5 stars, unfortunately, but there's that one. And then I read The Shape of Darkness by Laura Purcell. Now this is coming out in February 2021, I want to say, and I was given a review copy of this by Bloomsbury, and I got a NetGalley approved ebook of this. So this follows Agnes Darken. So she is a silhouette artist in the 1800s in Bath, and she becomes embroiled in the dark underworld of the dead and the dying. By accident, she starts to notice similarities between clients who are coming for their silhouette and for her to do the piece for them, and then notices that they seem to be dying, and she believes she's cursed, that everybody that keeps coming to her is dying, and it's her fault. So she ends up searching through the back streets and finding a lady who specialises in seances, and her sister, her half-sister, who is albino, called Pearl, seems to be bringing a lot of money in for her. She does these seances and she speaks to the dead. So Agnes becomes completely embroiled in this. We get a lot of really interesting backstory about Agnes's previous life. She's been surrounded by a lot of death and loss. She lost her sister, her fiance, her father, and what small family she has left, she's incredibly protective of. So her sister's husband, her sister's son, and her mother seems to be all she has left, and she is very attached to them. And Agnes is a fantastic character because we are not sure at any point whether she's reliable. We question everything, but the seance scenes in this book were so fun. They were creepy and strange, but I was really into the horror elements of this book, which usually I'm not a horror reader, but in this book the anticipation was really there. I think there was real glints in this book of her very first book, The Silent Companions, and it had that compulsive, propulsive element to it that meant that you had to keep reading and had to find out what was going on. The only criticism I will have of this book, and it leaks a little bit into the criticism I would have overall for Bone China, which I read last month, and that is, I think this book went on for slightly too long. So I think we were really in and invested in the book, and then there's a certain period of time that you will stay invested for, and then your interest will start to wane. And in Bone China, it was trying to do too many things. We were having the back history of too many things going on. And this echoed that in some ways. There was a climax and there was an event. And then we still had 3 or 4 chapters after that when I think that could have been condensed. And there was a part where I would have almost put the full stop and stopped. And there was another 2 chapters after that, which I personally didn't think gave anything extra to the reader and I didn't think were necessary. But Agnes is a really interesting character and I thoroughly enjoyed spending time with her, and I liked the setting of Bath. Bath was its own character as well in this novel, which I really enjoyed. It was Victorian and creepy, and I think maybe the setting was just more interesting for me than the setting in Bone China. And it did echo a lot of her writing style from The Silent Companions, that building up of tension, that not knowing who to trust, a character that's seeing things that don't look like they're there, or experiencing supernatural things that aren't really there, or are they? That's Laura Purcell at her prime, and she delivered that in this book, but I just think it was a little bit too long-winded for me. And so I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I couldn't stop reading it when I was reading it, but it wasn't at that just higher level for me. And then I read Pine by Frances Toon, and since I finished it, it is precariously balanced right now between a 4.5 and a 5, because since I have finished reading it, I've just built up this affection for it that I didn't actually have while reading it. So this is a really interesting one for me. So when I first started reading it, I took it out of the library from BorrowBox. I didn't enjoy it, and the first few chapters I thought, I'm not going to enjoy this, and this is going to be so disappointing. This is the most highly anticipated novel of this year. It's all over the Waterstones website. As soon as you walk into Waterstones, obviously now we're in our second lockdown, I can't walk into Waterstones anymore, but when I had the freedom to walk into Waterstones, it was all over the front table when you come in, and everybody's raving about it. I've just watched a video last night where Simon Savage said it's one of the most highly anticipated books for him and he wants to finish it this year. So there's a lot of hype coming at you from this book. But this book is what I would call 100% a grower. And when you first read it, you might not anticipate where it's going to go and how you're going to build your relationship to it. But I became engrossed. So this is set in the Highlands, in modern day. And this follows Lauren, who is living with her father, her mother went missing when she was quite young. She has no recollection of her mother, and she's just surviving with her father. She has a friend at school, a little boy who she's very close to, and the novel starts with the little boy's mother taking them out trick-or-treating. So her father, Niall, drives her around the corner, he parks his car, and she goes out. She's dressed as a vampire, and she goes out with her best friend, and they go trick-or-treating around the houses. It's a really fantastic introduction to this story, actually, and since finishing it, I think that first chapter is really important because it sets the scene of who everybody in the neighbourhood is. So it's quite a small area, everybody knows everybody, and everybody knew Lauren's mother. So they often talk about her, and they don't often have nice things to say. There is a strange, older, kooky lady that lives on the street who seems to have liked her mother. But apart from that, people are very secretive to Lauren about her mother. And she feels there's a lot of tutting and judging going on. And it's interesting to see that perspective from a child, that she's perceptive enough to see that. Her mother was quite a spiritualistic person who was quite a hippie and believed in spirits and energy, and so in a house they have candles and things that her father, he's so heartbroken that she left, that he's never been able to get rid of. And there's questions about whether her mother was a witch and things like that, and there's a lot of talk. And then she has a friend, a babysitter. She's older than Lauren, but Lauren really looks up to her, who's come back from university for a period of time. There's been an issue at her uni and she's been asked to come home for a while. And so Niall, he's playing at the local pub with friends of his who asked him to help the band because one of the members was poorly and he can play the guitar, I believe. And so he asks the girl, Anne-Marie, to look after Lauren. And Anne-Marie and Diane, the older girls, look after Lauren, and then Anne-Marie goes missing, and we take the story from there, really. And again, this is another novel that looks back on the past to make sense of the future, and I really love those kind of novels. I love secrets in the past that we have to unweave and pick through to make sense of the future, and how incidents and events in the past come back to haunt characters in the future. I'm just really into those kind of novels, and there's a lot of them out there at the moment, so I'm highly satisfied. But this is slow, this book, and it's subtle and it's incredibly clever. It does not bosh you around the head with thriller tropes. It is soft and gentle and meanders, yet creepy, unnerving, insidious. It's very hard to describe, but it has an energy that it's not intense, but it gets you, it stays with you, it sticks with you. It is creepy without having to use any of the exhausted weapons in the crime and thriller arsenal of writers. And considering this is a debut, I believe, this is astonishing. I believe she has worked in publishing, so I think she just knows, she's kind of honed this skill by default over her career of knowing what works, and maybe she's read a lot, proofread a lot of work and seen where things could be improved. I don't know, she's just got an incredible talent, and I think we will know this name and she will become very successful, because after I finished it, it stuck with me, and the more I've thought about it, I've just thought, wow, yes, that is incredibly clever, and it's unassuming in its subject matter, but very powerful upon reflecting. It's just got that stick quality to it. So absolutely fantastic. It again is very atmospheric, perfect for this time of year. It's kind of set autumn turning to winter anyway. And Lauren is a fantastic character. I'm really enjoying more child protagonists as I'm getting older and seeing their perspective and the world that she sees from her angle. And then we switch to Niall, who's her father, who's just struggling with alcoholism. He's heartbroken that his wife has left him, and the juxtaposition of those two characters and their relationship to one another and the perception from the outside all the three elements just create such an energy. It's just so good. So yeah, I think it's hovering towards 5, and I think it might be in my favourite books of the year for 2020. So that's fine. And then I read Sleepless by Louise Mumford. So this, I was given a review copy from NetGalley, and this is published by HQ. And this is a science fiction novel, to be honest. I think it was sold and backed as a thriller, but I don't see it as a thriller, I see it as a science fiction. So it's about a main protagonist, Thea, who is an insomniac, and she really struggles with sleeping. And then she is approached by a company that say they have a cure for insomnia, that they are doing sleep experiments, and they will be able to give her techniques that mean she'll be able to sleep. And again, nothing suspicious about the idea of going to a remote island cut off from everyone, not being able to have your phone and internet access, and spending 3 weeks with these scientists who are going to cure you of insomnia. So yeah, obviously it's a recipe for disaster. It has dystopian elements to it, as you can imagine. There is the science fiction element in that when they go to the island, they're given these chips that are kind of inserted into their temple, and they can't get them out. And then obviously strange things start happening. The building is quite swanky, high tech. Thea's mum, Vivian, can't get in contact with her. She just stops ringing her daily. So obviously it's got all that science fiction dystopian element to it. And I really enjoyed the experience. It gave me a flavour. I quite enjoy dystopian fiction, and I've not really ventured much into science fiction, and it was encouraging me to definitely try more science fiction, fantasy, supernatural, dystopian style fiction, because it was really readable and I couldn't put it down, and the chapters were quite short, which was really good for me because it was snappy, it kept going. The only problem is the last quarter really dragged. It was as if the author had forgotten how to plot the rest of the novel, which can be quite hard, because sometimes I think for authors, I think this is a debut author as well, sometimes the issue is when you have an idea that's fantastic, you're so enthusiastic about creating it, but sometimes the idea burns out a lot faster than the plotting and the actual execution of the idea. So it's not a criticism, it's just I found the last quarter focused a lot on the concept of escape, and that part really dragged from knowing that shit's hitting the fan to escaping. That was long, and that was the part of the novel that I start losing interest. I kind of want the meat of the story to be finding out the mystery and then the reveal. That might just be my personal preference, but long-winded escape is never really interesting for me, and this book stretching out just a little bit too long. And then I've seen reviews on NetGalley that said how the ending was a little bit abrupt, which I would agree with. But this is a debut author, and I think you are obviously testing out your writing style when you write your first novel. I mean, there are some authors that can just write a bestseller straight away from their first novel, but that's not many people, and that's not natural. Like, most human beings need a few tries and a bit of practice. So I'm not saying Louise Mumford is not a very talented writer, because she is. I'm not doing any criticism about her writing style. I'm just saying the execution wasn't fantastic at the end, but I enjoyed it and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read a short story collection, We Will Tell You Otherwise by Beth Mayer. Now, I had been approved about a year, maybe 2 years ago on NetGalley for this, and never got round to reading it. So I wanted to give the feedback onto my NetGalley for this, so I thought I would order it, and it was really cheap on Amazon. So this is a selection of short stories centred around topics like death, trauma, emotional hardship, but it's in a realistic writing tone. So there's no supernatural elements in this, there's no fantasy elements. It's not a dark collection, it's more a realist collection, I would say. There's one character, the dad's reflecting on his child has cancer, and he's reflecting on his relationship with his wife and how they'll never really go back to the same relationship, and how he doesn't know where he fits in because he's still a dad and a regular man and he wants to be a husband, but his wife has been completely consumed by their sick child and that fear, and she's gone into protective mode, and he doesn't really know where they're going to go from there. So it's a reflection on their relationship, not really on the child's illness. Oh, and the first one, we have a father is a doctor and he takes his son fishing, and his son always says, I really want to see a cadaver, a dead body, I really want to see one. And they go fishing and there is a fight that ensues when they're at their fishing camp between two people, and somebody gets stabbed, and the father says, you know, we need to get out of here, we'll call the ambulance, and the son says, no, we need to go, we need to be supportive and go there. And at the end, in some kind of weird reward, the father lets him see a dead body. So they don't really have any like twist or trick, but they were a really interesting collection, and it was fun to read a short story collection again, and it's made me want to kind of go back and read some other short story collections. I wrote in my journal that I didn't enjoy it as much as Julia Armfield's Salt Slow or In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, and Things They Say in the Dark by Kirsty Logan. Those I think were better collections, but this was a fun collection, and it sparked my interest in getting to some more. But I probably will go back and read this again at some other point, because I can't really remember any of the stories now anyway, so I think it'll be fun to dip in and out of again and see. But I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was a pleasurable enough reading experience. And then the final book I read was Taken by Tony Parsons, which is the most updated book in the DC Wolf series. I was really happy with this book. I didn't know where we were going to go from the trauma that happened in the last book. I don't want to spoil it, but a really important character, something happens, and I didn't know where Tony Parsons was going to take this story going forward. What I love is that Tony Parsons has become a really loved author by me now. So his Wolf has slowly crept in there like Cora and Strike did, and found a place in my heart as a protagonist that I just love. And the stories are fun, they're escapist, but they have that cozy element. So yeah, Wolf is officially on my team now. I've let him in. So I would like there to be more Wolf books, but I don't know if there will be. So this girl is taken, and the police think it's the wrong girl because she is the flatmate of Harry Flowers' girlfriend. But Harry Flowers is a big drug dealer who seems to have gone into retirement and now works for a auto vehicle. It's one of those yards where they destroy cars. I don't know much about cars. There's obviously an official title for that. I can't remember. Waste disposal or something. Auto vehicle disposal. I don't know. Anyway. So everyone thinks that the wrong girl has been taken because the girl, the flatmate, was driving around in Harry Flowers' girlfriend's car. Sneezer, I think is her name. And the girl, Jessica, was driving the car, but it's not her car, it's Sneezer's car. So then we go on a quest like we do with Wolf to find out, is Harry Flowers involved? Is his men involved? Is somebody trying to seek revenge on Harry Flowers? Did they get the right girl? It had that same really compulsive reading quality that the first 3 books did. Like when he focuses on one potential incident. So the first 3 books was catching a killer. This one is finding that girl. Whereas I think Girl on Fire and Die Last was a quest to find a group of people, an organisation, a ring of people. And sometimes I lose that. I like the more intimate stories. In this, we find out a lot about Harry Flowers. We find out a lot about Jessica, the missing girl herself, and her family life. There's also a really interesting subplot around Pat Whitestone, who is Wolf's boss, and we've learnt a lot about her back history. Her son is blind because of a tragedy in a club where he was attacked with a glass bottle, and we know a lot about Wolf's colleagues. He has a very intimate relationship with them because his job isn't 9 to 5, it's all the time. So we get character development and issues in her personal life that Wolf tries to deal with and takes on because he sees his work colleagues as a family. Then we learn more about Scout and Stan. Scout is Wolf's daughter and Stan is the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, which I love both of them, and Scout is such an effervescent character. She jumps off the page, she's so vibrant, and she brings a really interesting lightness into Wolf's life because his working life is quite intense and depressing and scary, and Scout is always a constant sunshine, and that's lovely. And I find the relationship between Scout and her mother is just so heartbreaking, and Wolf really tries to accommodate their relationship, and things keep happening, and the heartbreaking element of Wolf trying to protect Scout from the rejection she feels from her mother, and how it doesn't really work out. But between Scout, Stan and Wolf, they create a family, and it's wonderful, and it's just lovely, and I love Wolf and I love this series, and Tony Parsons is very, very, very talented. Ever since I started these books, he's just impressed me more and more, and I've really enjoyed it. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, loved it, and hope there will be more out. So that's it. That is the wrap up part 1 for November. Thank you guys for being so patient and for staying with me, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.